Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. I'm Beatriz Mourad, and today I'm joined by Melanie Moyer.
Hello.
And Sam Quattro.
Hi.
Today is all about Disney princesses. The good, the bad, and the pretty of it all. Why is it so easy to both love and hate these characters, and how big of a role do they have in our popular culture? We are going to try and scratch the surface of this genre of Disney. A genre that made Disney what it is today. Seriously, Disney would not exist without Disney princesses. # justice for Snow. Like, Mickey gets all the credit. Mickey gets all the credit when, in fact, it was Snow White who hard carried Disney Animation Studios.
Yeah.
So, you know what I always found funny about the Snow White thing was that his wife, legitimately said to him, she's like, nobody's going to sit in a theater for 90 minutes and watch animation. Like, you're ridiculous. And he was like, well, what if I do anyway? And now here we are.
And fun fact, Snow White was the highest grossing film of all time until Gone with the Wind 2 years later. Like, that's a very successful film if it takes Gone with the Wind to topple you.
It got a honorary Oscar.
Yeah. Which
was an Oscar with 7 little Oscars next to it.
Aww. But yeah, so you can find out more about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes at overlyanimated.com/iTunes, where we appreciate your star ratings, or search for Overly Animated on your favorite podcatcher. Okay, so it's a big topic. We're not going to cover everything. It's impossible to. So I kind of just want to start off with the personal. Did you guys like Disney princesses growing up? Is there any particular one that you gravitated towards? Any fond memories or not so fond memories of these characters? Sam, let's start with you.
Well, growing up, my favorite Disney movies had to do with, the animals and, the Hunchbacks.
The animals.
So, I would say I wasn't, a huge fan of Disney princesses. In terms of, me growing up, I was, a tomboy. I didn't have time for, the frilly Disney princess garb and all that, BS. Yeah, I don't know. But, growing up and, being an adult, I have an appreciation for them. You know, I have watched many a Disney princess film, and I think that they're all great. But, there's a lot to unpack there. There's, a lot of feminism stuff, a lot of weird stuff. I don't know, man.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And Mel, what about you?
I'm trying to think, at the time, was I into it? Because, is it my nostalgic brain thinking, oh yeah, I was totally into Disney princesses, or was I not really? Because I recall being super terrified of Snow White. Not Snow White the person, Snow White, but the movie. I specifically couldn't watch past the part where she turns into the hag. That entire sequence scared me.
That was very scary.
That's traumatizing.
Beauty and the Beast, as an adult, ended up being one of my favorite films, period. But I remember as a kid, that one freaked me out a little bit too. Yeah, when I think back, what actually I was really into when I was a kid was Mulan.
Yes.
I remember specifically the day that my VHS tape, got eaten by the VCR.
No.
And how just freaked out I was, and so just because I had played it so much.
Yeah.
But I also gravitated towards a lot of non-Disney princess stuff because I was really into Atlantis. When that came out, and Hercules, which I guess, is he's the male Disney prince. I don't know. That's the weird one.
He's a Greek god. That qualifies, I think.
So I think if I'm being honest, yeah, I wasn't super into them when I was a kid. But now as an adult, I'm, into the mature analytics of, the Disney princess.
The feminist theories of Disney.
Yeah, feminist theories of Disney princesses.
Yeah. I'm on the similar boat. I have a theory on because everyone has the one Disney movie that they just completely stand by. And I feel like it's just a generational thing. A lot of people who are kind of born in say I don't know, if they were a certain kid during 89, then Little Mermaid was everything for them.
Oh, yeah.
Because like so many people like that were born like around 93, 94, I feel like they all say Mulan. And it's like same, yeah. Like I'm like Mulan was everything for me. I was like, this is the greatest. This is super interesting. And I didn't really think about Disney princesses that much, at least as a concept, until I was like much older. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a thing. And oh, why does she like sleep for the entire movie? And I never questioned this. Or why does she like want to lose her voice for a man? We'll get into it. But yeah, so obviously like I was already very much tinted by the I guess the modern Disney princess, not so much the classic one. I was never really big into it. Yeah.
I mean, I guess this is something that we might discuss, but where do you draw the line for modern Disney princess?
Okay, so I kind of broke it down to 3. Okay, so I did classic Disney, which is, hold on, let me pull it up. But it's classic Disney, which is Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty. Okay. Then you have the Renaissance of Disney, which is Ariel, Belle, Pocahontas, Mulan, Jasmine. And then you have like the current Disney, which is Tiana, Rapunzel, Merida, Elsa, and Anna. And Merida, it's also like
Moana.
A question. Oh yes, and Moana. Yes, she's there.
Moana counts.
Moana.
Just letting people know, don't get mad at me. It's just that it cut off.
No, I forget her a lot too.
It went on the second page.
She's
there, people.
She's just too new.
She's very recent, so sometimes I forget.
Yeah. But like that's the question though. Also, like, should Merida be counted as a Disney princess? And she's technically Pixar. It's like, why isn't? Okay, let's just start with the whole reason why I decided to do this podcast, which is the Wreck-It Ralph teaser trailer came out and had that wonderful scene with the princesses, arguably the thing that stole the show. It's the reason why everyone's going to go see Wreck-It Ralph now, or Wreck-It Ralph 2. I'm
Cinderella.
Is because of this scene with all these Disney princesses. And it's interesting that you say you're Cinderella, because it's kind of like this is giving a chance for a lot of these princesses that weren't really given a personality. Suddenly now they have a personality. Suddenly it's like in that very brief moment, I got more from Cinderella than I did in the entire Cinderella film.
You got ears.
It's funny, right? Because it's like, what a cultural commentary that Cinderella is using her own glass slipper as a shank.
Right?
Like, you could write entire papers on that 3-second action.
I mean, and it's brilliant. Of course she would be the one. She's got it, it's wonderful, but at the same time, it's like all I remember from the actual Cinderella film was just like her looking that gif that everyone uses where she's just looking into space.
Oh yeah, she's a meme.
Yeah,
she looks like super under the influence.
Oh man, but yeah, so. For the most part, everyone's like freaking out about this scene and it being so wonderful and like, oh my god, it's the princesses. It's the most ambitious crossover in cinema history. I agree.
It isn't.
It kind of is.
I agree.
I don't think so.
I do.
But
like, here's my backstory with this, because I didn't watch the Wreck-It Ralph trailer when it came out. Like, the first time I actually saw it was when I went to go see The Incredibles.
Right.
So when I was seeing all this stuff pop up, when everyone was like, were you poisoned? Were you this? Were you that? Like, I didn't know where it came from. I was just like, oh, the internet's found a new thing, I guess. And they were like applying Disney princess stuff to like Avengers people is where I was seeing it the most, because that's where my Tumblr's at right now. So I was like, I don't know what this is. And then when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh my God. Especially because they got pretty much most of the available original voice actors back to do these cameo bits.
Yeah, I mean, question, is that Pocahontas' voice actress?
I don't know. That's why, like I say, most of the available, because I'm not sure about all of them.
Some of them are probably dead.
Yeah, well, do you think Snow White?
I'm thinking Snow White is the one that would be.
I don't know.
I think she might be. She might have passed on. That's why
we have Google.
But like, yeah, like that was Idina Menzel. That was is it Demi Moore?
Mandy Moore.
Mandy Moore. I always get
Demi Moore is
so
I think Jodie a little Benson. Higher in the celebrity grade. Like,
so it was Jodie Benson as Ariel, Paige O'Hara as Belle, Linda Larkin as Jasmine. She's the original. Original Mulan, original Tiana, original Rapunzel. Yeah, it looks like everyone came back.
Gotcha. But yeah, so it was a
White.
except Snow White, of course. But again,
She's
this
dead.
was this lovely, like, little moment, and yet some people have been criticizing it a little bit, and I kind of see what they're saying. But you could also make the argument that this criticism has been, since the beginning of Disney princesses, has been a thing. A lot of people are saying how all these princesses look the same. And by look the same, I mean that they have the same body type. They have the same body shape, same facial structure. Sure, one's blonde, one's a different shade of skin color, but if you look at the essential way that the characters are designed, they're kind of the same thing. And a lot of people are bugged by that. And there is this kind of argument that it's like, oh, well, it's this Disney style and whatever, but this kind of gets us into this conversation of like, well, what do we do with these kind of beauty standards that these princesses promote? Because, I mean, think about it. For a long time, they were all white. They're all thin. They all have, like, these eyes that are just too, like, big eyes from that movie, that Tim Burton movie.
Which one?
You know, that Tim Burton movie with, what's her name? Amy Adams, and it's literally called Big Eyes or something.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking of, like, the animated ones. I was like, yeah, they have some big eyes.
No. I'm going for the very creepy live-action film where the eyes scared me. Anyway, point is, like, it's just, there's this very specific style, and it's kind of like, one, what is the impact that has on young girls in particular, because they're the ones who are basically consuming this stuff. And then two is like, well, where do we draw the line of like, okay, this is a Disney style versus Disney, you gotta differentiate this up. Like, that's not an excuse anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So it's kind of like, that was the main concern. So I was just curious about what how you guys would respond to this type of criticism based on the Wreck-It Ralph teaser.
So are we criticizing the Wreck-It Ralph teaser for continuing to like perpetuate the idea that, you know, all of them need to look big-eyed and thin, or like the fact that it didn't address that, or like the criticism of that being the first one? Okay. Yeah. So they were still animated the same way even in Wreck-It Ralph is what you're saying. Basically.
Like I have my thoughts on the criticism, but I'm just curious how you guys like reacted to that.
With that, I would wait to see how the movie handles it, just because, you know, for the sake of a trailer, they're going to do what they're going to do. And like, you know, this will probably end up being a 2-minute scene, even though they're using it as a huge like promotional pool, like you mentioned. Like everyone's going to watch just to see that scene. But you know, so it's like I don't know how it's going to go. Like, did we see basically all of it in the trailer? Like, is there more like commentary there to be had? You know, they look the way they look, I guess, you know, because unfortunately that's just like the way they were all designed in their original properties, and like they're going to keep that. Like they just kind of like morphed them into a little bit of the Wreck-It Ralph style of animation. Cinderella's ears were a big talking point.
Well, I appreciate that.
They're adorable.
They actually gave her ears. I'm like, thank you.
She's very cute. I like how Cinderella looks. She's adorable.
Yeah. Well, she slices the throat of a child.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But,
it's my kind of lady.
Same.
What about you, Sam? Like, how do you react to this kind of?
I mean, yeah, there isn't too much body diversity here, but then again, in like the whole social context and like looking at what other like media / products that are aimed towards young girls, like look at Barbie, for example. They just like did the body diversity Barbies like within the last 5 years.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know. I don't really expect Disney to just like go back and, you know, make Cinderella like have a certain kind of body type that's different from like the skinny stick figure she was, or something else like that. Right. That might be more on like my part though, because like, you know, I think the big shock in the trailer was seeing like all the 2D princesses animated in 3D, and like, oh, that's cool, and you don't really think about like, you know, how I'm looking at like comparison pictures between the 2D and the 3D. They kind of made
spot the 3 differences.
They made like Pocahontas skinnier, and they did like a whole bunch of other like small tweaks and like little things. And I don't know, man. It's just is what it is. You know, maybe someday we'll have a more body diverse princess. I think Moana.
Yeah, I was going to say Moana's
she is. Yes, Moana's in there. I don't know how Moana looks a little bit skinnier to me too, but that's me.
Because I mean, I don't know. Like when I first when I first saw the critique, I was like, I get it, but at the same time, I was like, maybe. But I feel like that's the point. They're essentially going to the marketing, like the online version, like the Disney website, right? That's where they're going. And when it's marketing, it's gonna look very different from the actual product. If that makes any sense. So, I don't know. For me, I just kind of saw it as, like, maybe that, like, I don't know. I thought that was, like, an intentional decision. Or maybe it was just, like, easier for them to animate them by, like,
I guess
uniformity, I guess.
I guess my most interesting, that's not right. The thing I found most interesting, there we go, is like choosing what outfit, right? Is the outfit they're going to put them in.
The canon outfit for...
Yeah, like the big outfit, right? Like Rapunzel has her hair again. Like I couldn't tell if Anna still had the streak in her hair, but she had her little snow dress. Like, obviously Elsa owns no other pair of clothing. So that's what she's in.
She threw it all away, and I don't think she can get it back.
Yeah,
it's all in that mountain somewhere.
She has no other clothes. She has no access anywhere to other clothes.
Nope.
As that's how it seems. But anyway, yeah, like that's like I was like, oh, like that's it, like picking, like seeing what outfits they picked to put people in was kind of an interesting thing to me, because like, okay, if this is meant to be the ultimate commentary, the ultimate meta self-referential commentary on Disney princesses, and they
just put them all in their princess garb.
How they're choosing to put them. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Like they put them in their most iconic looks.
I think that makes it more subversive though, right? Like because they are like in their most iconic look. It's like I feel like if you put Cinderella without her glass slippers and suddenly it's like you wouldn't have that moment where she legit just smashes one.
Like who's that?
So I feel like I feel like it's a very intentional that they're making them look as iconic as we think of them in their most iconic outfit, in their most iconic look, just so that whatever it is that they do with them, it will make it whatever it is they do more subversive, if anything.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like more into these films in particular. Is there any can classic Disney princesses be saved? Like is beyond their historical value, beyond Snow White simply being the first animated feature film in English in Technicolor, how can I justify showing this to a young girl and being like, this is women. This is a woman.
Make them quirky and clumsy.
Looking at Snow White.
Showing the film Snow White. Like, how do I justify showing this to a young girl and being like, this is the type of representation I want you to be in your life?
Yeah. So that's the thing, right? Is like, I would show it to somebody who, for the sake of like film history and, as like a piece of, like, okay, this is the first animated film, but I wouldn't say to a kid like, oh, check this out, it's really great and you'll learn a lot from it.
Yeah, Snow White should be your role model.
Okay, so then where do you draw the line? Like which are the movies that you'd be like, I feel comfortable showing this to a child versus like, in terms of just simply like representation wise, like this is something I want a child to like intake versus where do you draw that line? Because so for some people it differs.
For me, I would honestly probably start with Ariel.
Really?
Yeah.
I think I might start with Jasmine.
Jasmine, not Belle?
Oh, yeah, I forgot Beauty and Beast came before. My bad.
I hate all of you.
I'm sorry.
I have a hot
normally I would answer with Belle, right? Like, normally I would say, Belle was the first, like, kind of, time we deviated from this in a huge way, because that movie just deviated from everything in a huge way and kind of, like, played against itself. But with Ariel, like, I don't see... Like, yeah, like, I don't love the idea of her giving up her voice for a dude, but I do love the overall idea of her independence, right? Like, yeah, like, she gave up her voice to be with a dude, but she made the choice to do it. And the defiant, rebellious teenager aspect. Like, you know, she was the first time she took like agency in her own story, even though like personally I would never, and I would hope that nobody else would ever, but you know, like it was the first time but then again, you could even argue, I suppose, that Sleeping Beauty did that because she straight up like disobeyed her fairy godmothers and did that for a guy too. So maybe it's not so new, but
it's
I don't know.
interesting.
I'd feel okay with Ariel.
It's interesting you mentioned that because a lot of people make the case that even with the early Disney princesses, that they are essentially the beginnings of feminism because every action, and this is a quote from, I think it's from The Cracked is the website. I don't know what it's called, but I read there was a quote saying that every Disney princess shows the beginnings of feminism, at least in the classic Disney princesses, because they all their actions are rebelling against patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of them in general.
How does, I guess, okay, so then how does like Snow White
I don't know. I didn't write it, so I wouldn't
You're
know.
like, I didn't write it. I just thought it was no.
Or haven't seen it in like years.
I mean, I guess you can argue her interaction with the dwarves and kind of the way she pushes back against them a little bit. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to pick apart there.
But I don't know. I think because that's also the thing. Like even with like, for instance, Sleeping Beauty, which by the way, she was like my favorite render of the Wreck-It Ralph stuff. Sleeping Beauty looked amazing. But yeah, it's that whole thing of like, but she's like asleep for most of it. Like there's just completely removed of agency as a result of going against the patriarchy. If we're gonna go in line with that,
it's like
statement.
a consequence of going against the patriarchy.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, I guess, the beginnings of feminism, but also like you can clearly see that the people who made those movies were not feminists.
Yeah, well, it's the ultimate male gaze, right? Like Sleeping Beauty stories. Like that's what that's referred to in folklore is a Sleeping Beauty cycle of stories, which Snow White is. Like the idea that she's asleep in a glass box, like she's on display and like just completely and immobile, like involuntary, like all this stuff. It's like the ultimate male gaze, and there are 7 dudes watching her.
Fun stuff. But yeah, so there's like nothing. So you guys would go with Ariel and with Belle is how you guys would start with showing like
90s,
young kids, like
80s, 90s.
I think so. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, but question, like how? Okay, because for instance, like hot take right now.
Hot takes for days.
Yeah.
I honestly feel romance in Disney movies haven't been properly done until like current Disney. And like a lot of times, or no, that's a lie, because Mulan did a pretty good job of it. But
that was Mulan's like was very natural, right? Because like they didn't really end up together, but it was like falling into kind of.
Yeah.
Let's go on a first date.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Basically.
Let's have dinner.
But yeah, so like a lot of time, and something I've kind of found is that with the Renaissance Disney, what they often do is they don't necessarily, like, they will subvert what classic Disney princesses would do in terms of like Belle with her books and Ariel wanting to be, you know, actually having agency to do what she wants to do. But it always is dragged down by the romance.
Yeah.
Point in question is Ariel, right? You know, it's like this movie would be so great if only she didn't lose the voice for a guy. But, I mean, again, you're right. It's her choice to do so. So it's kind of like, well, then what about...
It's
a dumb choice, but she has the right to do it. But also, why not just lose the voice so she can have legs, so she can go to the world she wants to go to? Like, why do you have to make it about a guy when she already lays the foundation for another reason just simply to do it?
Yeah. So a huge reading of this whole thing, right? And I have to do some more investigation, like, to vet this, but Howard Ashman, who is the lyricist for Little Mermaid up until like halfway through Aladdin, when he passed away, was like a huge feminist. You know, so a lot of people have looked at Part of Your World and pointed out nothing in this song, you know, talks about Eric at all or talks about the dude. Like, it talks about all the stuff she wants to do. Like, she wants to run on the sand and be in the sun and like collect weird crap and, you know, do all this stuff that she can't do under, I was going to say under the sea, under the ocean,
under the sea,
as a mer person, you know. And, you know, that line that gets brought up a lot in this reading is, betcha on land, they understand that they don't reprimand their daughters.
Right.
And like, just this idea that Howard Ashman was inserting into this, like, a feminist narrative and feminist lyrics, because this song, which is the huge defining song of The Little Mermaid, has nothing to do with the dude. Like, later, yes, she gives up her voice to be with this dude, but, you know, the ultimate idea is like, you know, maybe he represents to her this freedom for whatever reason. Like, that's the image of freedom that she's going for, because she was into the idea of being a human living on land way before she ever met him. And she was stalked, you know, and she was collecting things and, you know, yearning to do this. It was just, this was the catalyst that said, okay, like, yeah, like, this is it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a move for it. So that's a deeper reading, though, than what kids are going to see, because, you know, you look at it and you say, oh, she gave up her voice for a dude and she left her family and grew a pair of legs for a dude, which is not wrong. It's just, you know, there's a lot more meaning to it underneath that I think you could justify saying, okay, like, this was more than kind of what it gets boiled down to.
Right. I think if anything, I honestly think the problem with Little Mermaid is that it ends with marriage. I think had it not ended with marriage, had it just ended kind of like Mulan in terms of like, it's the start of a relationship, there's still potential for it to not end up in the end. Had it not been presented as true love, then maybe it's kind of, had it just kind of been more of a I guess, more mystery into whether or not they end up together or not, then maybe it would have been much more of like, oh, she didn't just do this for him. Like, she knows that this itself may not pan out, but she's still like, you know, has like, she's going to have her legs and she's still going to have a life and doesn't necessarily 100% have to involve him. But the fact that it is portrayed as love at first sight and it ends with marriage and it's like that typical kind of, I don't know, I just feel like with these Disney Renaissance films, or at least up to a certain point, there comes this point where it's like, yes, like they make certain steps, but then they backtrack it with this romance. I feel like the romance in the Renaissance films, at least again, with the exception of possibly Mulan, it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of like, well, what do we do with this? Like, you know, it's like, and it just kind of really goes to show how far we've come with Disney princesses. Because if you compare that to Frozen, which is kind of like current Disney films now, straight up, if they do everything but look straight into the camera and wink at you, right? They do everything but that. They're just like, we know what you think of Disney princesses, and we're gonna do the opposite, or we're gonna actually do a very overtly feminist thing. Like, love at first sight, we're gonna scoff at that, because we're gonna actually teach you how the world works. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's just kind of very, I don't know, I just kind of think it's interesting. Do you guys think, like, obviously we've progressed, but for these previous films, like, what do we do with them is the question. Like, how do we engage with them and still be able to enjoy them, or at least show them to like, you know, younger generations, the people who want to consume them? Because, you know, like, part of your world is this wonderful song, and like Sleeping Beauty is visually stunning to look at, you know?
Well, and that's like the thing, right? You have to pick it apart, you know, and kind of realize, like, you know, it's at this point, like, kind of like the sum of its parts, you know, like you say that this is important because this, and this is important because this. Like, I wouldn't show these movies to someone and say, look how great, like, you know, this is like a huge thing that we discussed in my writing seminars in college, which was like, you know, we have all these great pieces of literature that we consider great pieces of literature, and a lot of them are racist and super, super sexist and misogynistic and homophobic and all these things, but we consider them great works of art. And there was this great article by he wrote Things Fall Apart. I forget his name. I feel bad about that. But the author of Things Fall Apart, which was a response piece to Heart of Darkness, basically said, was posing this question.
Heart of Darkness?
What?
Just Heart of Darkness? What was he responding to?
I've just been forced to read Heart of Darkness so many times that the fact that you said, what is Heart of Darkness?
Yeah, I
shocked me. Heart of Darkness is a novella by Conrad about a man who travels into the interior of the Congo, white colonial man from England who's traveling into the Congo to meet with this mysterious fellow colonizer who has disappeared into the wilds of the land and stuff. And a lot of people have debated over the years whether or not it's being actually racist or it points out the racism. People, there's this huge debate about what is the true reading of Heart of Darkness. And ultimately, it is a book by a white man. So the author of Things Fall Apart wrote this book, Things Fall Apart. Chinua Achebe wrote Things Fall Apart, which is a story about a man in Nigeria and basically the effect that colonization had on him. It's the other side of the story and, essentially an own voices story. But he had this article where basically he talked about whether or not we can consider any sort of, piece of classic anything a great work of art if it's damaging to a culture, if it's damaging to a group of people, if, the fact that we have to look at it with an asterisk means that we should be looking at it at all. And there's no clear, concise answer to that, right? Because it's these are ultimately subjective moral values. To us, it's incredibly offensive for somebody to be a racist or to be misogynistic or to be homophobic, but to somebody else, it's not. That's just the way their mind works, as terrible as we think it is. So it's how do you treat something that has a poor history in the majority of subjective readings of it? For example, these sexist and extremely white original Disney princess movies. How do you look at it? And for me, you have to look at it and say, okay, here's why it's important. But at the same time, it's why am I saying this is important if it's teaching such terrible things and it's portraying such terrible things? As a medium, Snow White is important to me because it was the first time anyone had ever did anything like that. To me, Cinderella, I don't really consider it important because it didn't do much. It didn't do anything important to further its own medium, to further the art. And the same with Sleeping Beauty. So for me, I look at them as what did they contribute to the medium, to their craft, outside of this unfortunate bubble of what they were. So it's for me, it's I got to pick them apart and say, this is what's important. This is what led to something better and greater. And hopefully, is a little bit of a redemptive piece for the unfortunate appendages to it.
Right.
And speech.
No, that was fascinating. Sam, any comment?
Nope. Mel got it.
Okay, well then talking about how most of these films are made predominantly by white guys. How do we, is it shocking that Frozen was co-directed by a woman and it just so happens to be completely crashing this whole love at first sight ideal?
Yeah, you can't marry a man you just met.
You cannot. This is true. No, you can, but you shouldn't. Yeah. Right. And I think about it too. It's okay, it was co-directed by a woman. It's got 2 female leads. It's about what it's about. And it's the most successful animated film of all time. These things aren't coincidences.
Right.
And I think that Frozen really opened a door for them to realize people this is it, right? We're reading this metric right, we're reading this trend right, we're on the right track here. And then you get Moana, which is I consider that a huge step forward because all of her she gets her own action adventure that has nothing to do with a dude except for her buddy the Rock.
Right. Will we ever get a Disney princess film where you don't have singing?
Brave.
Would Wreck-It Ralph count? Because Penelope.
Well, Penelope's, yeah, you're right. But yeah, you're right with Brave. But yeah, I didn't think about Brave. Brave is one I often forget. But also directed by, co-directed by a woman. But that one's got some issues in terms of like the production side of it. Because they fired her.
No, that was a mess.
That was a headache. But okay, well, but from that same breath, like, yes, they got that right, but also Disney blamed like the Princess and the Frog underperforming partly because of the title of the movie. They said it was because there was the name princess in the title that suddenly that's part of the reason why it didn't make that much money. It's why they changed the titles from Rapunzel to Tangled, and why they changed the title of Snow Queen to Frozen.
Yeah,
they love their adjectives.
Yep.
And that's why, is because they thought, oh, The Princess and the Frog failed. It's also because of the name. People don't want to see a movie about a princess. And like, where's the logic then in that?
Yeah.
If The Princess and the Frog had an adjective name, what would it be?
Ribbit.
That's not an adjective.
That's like an onomatopoeia.
But even better, that's an onomatopoeia. Ribbit.
Yeah, I remember it was such like a big deal. Like people were criticizing them for changing the name to Tangled, and at the time I was like, I don't understand what's happening. But like, yeah, okay, so it's like, why then? Like, let's follow that train of thought, Disney. Like, okay, you think it underperformed because it had princess in the title, so you're taking princess out. Like, this is something that you've had for 70, 80 years as like this empowering idea of like, these are our female characters. This is our pantheon of iconic like culture heroes, not culture heroes like Prometheus isn't there, but you know what I mean? Now you're like jumping ship on that.
Right.
Like, what does that mean for everything that came before this?
Yeah. But on a brighter note, Jennifer Lee, this is something that news that dropped today. She has been named the Chief Creative Officer of Walt Disney Animation.
Yeah, good for her.
She took John Lasseter's old job. Justice.
Yeah.
That Jennifer Lee replaces him. Like, that is just the sweet taste of justice right there.
Yeah.
So good.
Okay, but given how she is now the Chief Creative Officer, like, what do you hope to expect from Walt Disney Animation now? Like, what do you hope now? Like, obviously, they've already probably planned out up until Frozen 2? In terms of their animated
past
slate?
that now, but
no,
yeah.
But in terms of like revealing it to us, I think up to what they've actually revealed,
Frozen 2 is the farthest out.
Yeah. So I mean, now what can we expect from the studio now? What should we expect from the studio? At least where Disney princesses are concerned. Like, are we going to get, I mean, again, we just recently got Moana. We're going to get Frozen 2. Are they going to keep giving us more Disney princess films, or are they going to like lay off for a bit and do some other stuff?
I don't know. Well, because like, I mean, it's difficult, right? Because like she did Frozen, but she also
did Wreck-It Ralph.
She did Wreck-It Ralph, like,
which also has a princess in it.
Yeah, but it's like,
but it's Wreck-It Ralph.
It is what it is. So yeah, like I don't know. It's interesting. I'm excited. She wasn't the only. She was like, it's her and
she's a
Doctor.
Chris Buck.
Chris
Buck, I think.
No, I thought it was Peter Doctor.
No, he produced it, I think.
No, I mean like also taking over Disney. Like she.
Oh no, yeah, but he. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm confusing. There's this other Peter, I think, who produced it. No, he's taking over Pixar.
Pixar, okay, that's what it is.
And she's taking on Walt Disney, and he's taking Pixar. But yeah, something interesting is also that I don't know if we're going to get too much into this, but we do have kind of the Kingdom Hearts stuff with the Disney princesses. Which, why that sound, Sam?
I don't know. Yeah.
You're not a fan of Kingdom Hearts?
I mean...
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Oh.
It's not that I don't like them, it's just like, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, well...
I feel like that has more to do with Final Fantasy than Disney Princess.
Okay.
Fascinating.
Okay, fair. All right. But we do get to see them in a different kind of more active role in that. So Disney has been, and given how we've seen with Wreck-It Ralph, they are pretty flexible with breaking kind of, or if anything, they've kind of encouraged this kind of breaking of like this image, especially with like Cinderella and with Snow White and with Sleeping Beauty. Like I think they want to break this image of like, oh, like we can't, like, oh, they're bad role models for kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they themselves, I think, are very much aware of like the negativity around the genre of Disney that they're involved in.
So for me, the first time Disney became self-aware, like Skynet, was, so I was told, you know, like before this, I was trying to find this paper that I wrote in one of my film classes that tracked Disney princesses from Snow White all the way up to, I think I went as far as Pocahontas. It was back in like 2011, so it was a while ago.
Before Frozen.
But basically, Beauty and the Beast was the first time they were actively self-aware, because the two guys who took over directing it, who also directed Hunchback of Notre Dame, basically designed it in a way that it would be reactive to everything that came before it. So like they designed Gaston to be like, this is the guy who would be the hero in any other Disney movie, and for all the reasons that he would be the hero in any other Disney movie, he's the villain in this one. And the opposite of that is true for the Beast. And obviously you've got Belle, who, you know, loves to read, and, you know, in the newer version of it, she's also like the inventor person in it. So it was like the first time that they were like, okay, like, what if we pushed against this? And it was hugely successful for them. Like every time as Disney has done this to itself, it's worked out so well. Like Beauty and the Beast was the first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture back when there was only 5 slots in the categories.
Right.
You know, so every time that they make these progressive pushes, like it works out well for them. Like, you know, when they did it with Frozen, like look what happened there. Like, you know, there's something to be said for the way when Disney becomes self-aware and actively says, okay, we know what you're thinking. We know what you're expecting. We know how you're going to, you know, go about analyzing this, and we're doing it too, because, you know, they are slowly but surely, you know, getting to the point where, you know, we're fixing ourselves. But there's, you know, like you can't, like the singing thing is probably never going to go away, because come on.
Come on.
And I'm fine with it. Belt it out. I love I'm a huge show tune person.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm
like
just saying, give me a rapping princess. Is what
I'm fine with it. Lin-Manuel Miranda should, you know, come back and do another Disney movie, but this time like total Lin-Manuel Miranda style.
Yeah. Okay, well then on that same note then, given how every time Disney does do a little push to be more progressive, it works out well for them, will they take the leap then? We kind of already had a podcast on this, but will they do it? Will they make Elsa gay?
Fingers
I have
crossed.
such hope. And the thing is this is the first time that I'm not 100% like, oh, they'd never do that, you know, because part of me, however small, is like, no, like I could actually see them doing something with that. Like, I don't see them doing like a full on like
make out
story. Yeah. Like, but I could see them very much like hinting at that, or like just putting things in there that, you know, the audience who of a certain, you know, mental maturity would pick up on and be like, oh,
subtext.
But is subtext enough, though? I know that
isn't.
No, it isn't.
I know that obviously, but I know that's how far they'd go, obviously.
Yeah, no, but it certainly isn't. It certainly isn't far enough at all. But like, I imagine them handling this kind of like how in How to Train Your Dragon 2, there was that one little like line that hinted with Gober.
Right.
And I could see them totally doing something like that. Like, I could see, you know, maybe not as comedic as that was played up to be, but you know, because the thing is like they knew what they were doing. Like, they didn't, you know, if you look at like everything that went into the making of Frozen and all their interviews, like they knew exactly what they were doing and they were conscious of it. So, you know, considering the push of the way culture is going and the way that you know, like our sensibilities are going, I, you know, don't see too much danger in the very least, you know, hinting at something like that. Also, like, it's friggin' Frozen. Like, even if Helen in Idaho boycotts it,
It's frozen.
It's frozen. Like, you're not going to make a dent. So,
right.
you know,
Gotcha.
it's one of those things where it's like, if you're going to do it with something, like, that's what they did with Star Wars, right? Like, they were, like, you know, they put all these female leads in Star Wars and all these leads played by people of color in Star Wars, because they're like, it's literal Star Wars. Like, and even with The Last Jedi, where these guys were like so, you know, PO'd that it was women and people of color, and tried to cut a version of the film that took out all the women, you know, and ended up with a 40-minute cut of the film, and like had all this like angry backlash and internet noise around it. You know, it still was literal Star Wars. Nothing happened.
Well, on that same note, though, countries don't ban movies for having people of color and women in them.
Yeah. Then that is like the big detractor, right? Is that like even the possibility of a hint of something like this gets a Disney movie banned in the foreign markets, which is where, you know, it's a huge moneymaker for them.
Right. Which is, it's what happened with the live action Beauty and the Beast, despite the fact that it was like nothing. It was legit just a wink, and that's really it.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, well, that about does it for me. And now I guess I'm gonna open up the... I don't know where I was going with this metaphor. Open the room, what's the phrase? I'm going to open the table, open
floor.
Discussion, the
It's from the
floor. That's what it is.
It's the floor.
That's what it is. That's what I wanted to
floor,
say. All right, so I'll open the floor to you guys in a section I want to call Rant Corner.
Oh boy.
It's a game where all you got to do is pick a princess that has bothered you and just unleash your rage. So just pick anything. Just... I'll go first. While you guys think, I'll go first.
Just go first.
I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit, well, a lot with Ariel, but how dare you? How dare you risk your voice?
You're yelling at her. Okay.
How dare you? Your voice gives being able to speak. And actually something I looked up that actually kind of made me like, it gave me goosebumps when I read it, was that with what's his name? Howard Ashton? Is that his last name?
Ashman.
When he, his, like, when they wrote, I think it was in Beauty and the Beast, when they dedicated it to him. And they said that he gave a mermaid her voice. And a beast his soul. He wrote part of your world, so it obviously makes sense, because that's the only time where she actually is allowed to speak and say what she feels. Because after that, you have directors and writers telling her, no, you're gonna lose your voice for some guy you just met, and you don't know.
That's how you really feel.
I can't with The Little Mermaid. I love Part of Your World, but like there's just this very deep rage I have for her, and how dare she? And Moana deserves a better friend. Is all I'm gonna say. Okay,
that's true. She does.
Like, everyone's, like, freaking out over Moana and Ariel, like, oh, look, they're looking at each other in the thingy, and it's like, oh, it's a perfect bromance or whatever, it's a perfect ship. No, because Moana deserves better, okay? Because Ariel picked Eric, and that was the wrong choice.
But that's so great, though. Like, of course Moana, great. She's like, oh my god, you are the ocean. Like, this is so great. This is my favorite
thing. She is not the ocean. She is a fish in the ocean. Let's get that right. Like, who would win in this, like, fight of, like, ranking, of, like, hierarchy? It would be Moana, because she's friends with the spirit.
Ariel's the daughter of the literal god of the sea.
So she's Hercules, like Hercules' cousin or something. Who cares?
Yeah.
She gave it up. Like, I would rather Hercules and Moana be buddies than Ariel and Moana. Because Ariel she's not worthy. Not worthy at all.
God, that's so sad. I do love, my favorite joke of all time was the one in Little Mermaid 2, when her daughter is like tweaking out, and she was like, oh yeah, when I was your age I was a regular fish out of water, and her daughter was like, you're right. And everyone's like, no, you don't understand.
She was
like
she was a literal fish out of water.
She was also 14.
Oh wow, they are looking at each other in the poster. That's really
yeah. People were freaking out about it.
Weird.
But she was 14 also. Like look, I understand with Little Mermaid, it's like there's like this very queer reading about Little Mermaid. Based
Is there really?
Yeah, because like it's a very like trans, like, you know, like part of your world, it's like a trans like experience, wanting to transform into who you actually feel more comfortable in, like the body that you feel most comfortable with. So there's totally like, I get it. And, you know, given, like, the background, like, the story was written by, like, the actual story the movie's based on was written by a gay man who was, like, he wrote it for, like, I think he wrote it for his lover or, like, the person he loved, like, this man he loved, and then he was rejected, so this was, like, this, like, heartbroken thing is what he wrote, and that's why it's so tragic, the story.
That's when, like, the Little Mermaid actually died in the original.
Yeah. Yeah, because
she becomes
she's rejected.
Seafoam.
Yeah, she becomes Seafoam because she's rejected. So, like, I understand that. I get it. But at the same time, how dare you, Ariel? You are not, how dare you? Anyway, that's the end of my rant corner. This is all so I could say this. Like, I created this little game just so I can rant about her.
I don't think I'm as angry about anything. Yeah,
oh, you don't have to. It's fine. But if there's, like, anything, any sort of...
Does anyone piss me off?
It doesn't have to be pissed off. It could be, like, an annoyance. It could be just, like, I don't know. It could be, oh, okay, like, another thing I just thought of. Mulan is from China. She's not a geisha, so why are you dressing her up like a geisha? True, come on now. Anyway, so that's any particular...
I mean, I guess I am a bit annoyed at Ariel because, like, you know, kind of exactly like I said, right? Like, you kind of immediately think of her when you think of, like, sort of the independent Disney princess because she was the rebellious 1980s teenager. But, like, all she was, you know, like... And, like, you know, she could have been, right? She was so close because it was, like, this person who took agency and was like, I'm going to get freaking legs and I'm going to walk around and it's going to be fantastic and I'm going to do everything I want to do outside of my, you know, box that I was, you know, raised in my entire life and I'm going to go see the world and it's going to be great. And all this is like, yes, you should do that. But then they had to go in and code it with, but there's a dude involved. And it's like, oh, like, come on, you were so close. So I guess, like, that's the closest thing I get, right? Because it's like, it was like, you know, Ariel's like, you know, the thing that everyone goes for, and she always gets Disney bound a lot, and people bring her up and stuff, and Howard Ashman's, you know, huge influence on, like, the feminist readings of it, and, like, the things he injected into his lyrics, and then it all just kind of, like, gets rightfully overshadowed, you know, in our minds by the fact that, like, oh, she did all this for a dude. Ultimately, like, that's like how it ends, right? Like, the happy ending is the wedding, not that she got legs.
Right. That's a good way to put it. That's a really good way to put it.
I'm now seeing fan art of baby Ariel and baby Moana hanging out, and I'm super into this. I didn't know this was a thing.
It's a thing. It's a very much
man. This is excellent.
Okay. Sam, any little nitpicks, any things that you want to just, like, let out?
I don't know. Something that's always bothered me is, like, the ages of the Disney princesses, because they're all, under 18. They're all, like, getting married and stuff, and obviously that's not good, and that's a really old world way to view, like, womanhood and, like, all that other stuff, and I guess, you know, ladies just got married when they were 13 or whatever.
Yeah, because it was... In Frozen, they're like 21 and 18. I was like, oh, the only two people not in the age of minority.
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, stuff like, you know, Prince Charming... What were you going to say, Beatrice?
No, please.
Okay. Stuff like, what's-his-face, Prince Charming guy and Snow White, like, getting with her when she's, like... Prince Charming. When she's, like, 13. And, yeah, right?
13?
Yeah, she's meant to be 13.
Yeah, it's like bad, and like back to what you were saying earlier, Beatrice, about like, you know, can we, like, in good conscience recommend these films to, like, younger people and point to that and say, like, you know, this is the woman that you should be? Definitely not in that case. Little Mermaid.
You're not even a woman, you're 13.
Yeah, and Little Mermaid brought up she's like, what, 14, 15, something like that.
Is turning 16.
Yeah, 16.
Because it's her birthday, I think, at the beginning, isn't it?
Yeah, who knows?
She was 14, though.
No,
she was turning 14.
She's turning 16 in the beginning of the movie when she misses her concert or whatever. I'm pretty sure. Did I dream this? I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure she was 16.
I don't remember.
How old
is the Little Mermaid?
Tell me. Google says she's 16.
Okay.
Well, how old is Rapunzel, by the way?
She turns 18 in the movie, and Flynn Rider is 26. So.
What?
No, just like no, especially like in what 2008, 2009. No, Disney.
That was
no.
2010.
That was 2010. Whatever. No, that's bad. Don't do that. Big age gaps like that, especially when one is still a minor. No.
Yeah.
Just like.
Yeah, no, I was surprised at how big that age gap was, because I thought it was a joke on Internet Movie Database back when you still had those. That was back when the forums were still there, and people were saying, no, he was 26. But I vetted it, and there was no, that was his official age as given by Disney. And I was like, holy sheesh.
And then my last thing, the revisionist history of Pocahontas.
Yeah.
That whole thing, especially aging her up and making her sexy, and she's the sexy native, and that's a whole trope. And
yeah.
It's messed up. Lindsay Ellis did a really good video essay almost a year ago. It's called Pocahontas Was a Mistake and Here's Why, where she compares Pocahontas to Moana and all the different nuances and feminism stuffs that go into those things. Yeah, stuffs. I think that did a really good job illustrating the point of this is kind of messed up and Disney shouldn't have done it. Yeah, I'm just Pocahontas is just who thought that was a good idea ever?
Yeah.
And they
the entire movie of Pocahontas?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's messed up.
And who decided it was a good idea to make a sequel of it?
Well, that one was meant to be more historically accurate.
I know, but still, you're romanticizing the life of this poor Native American girl who died when she was 14.
Yeah.
And it's it was just yeah, I'm not a fan.
It's interesting, right? Yeah. Because even Mulan was a pseudo possibly historical figure.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It was a poem, right?
Yeah. That we think might have been based on a real person.
Mulan.
It's why are you're picking these strangely actual human beings to turn into your
it's weird.
Your Disney princess.
Aladdin's also based on a story of
1001 Nights.
Yeah. Why am I the only one who's surprised that they've kind of just let Pocahontas still be part of all this?
Yes.
How in Fantasia, right?
Yeah.
They kind of took those little racist bits out of it.
Yeah.
And then just kind of hid them away and tried to ignore it. Am I the only one surprised that that Pocahontas is still here, despite it being very?
I'm surprised that I guess they've downplayed her a bit, because they don't know how to undo that sort of thing.
I mean, it is recent. It's easy to undo Fantasia. It's hard to undo Pocahontas.
Yeah, and that's what I mean, right? They don't know how to undo it or back off of it, so she's very minimally used. In situations like this, maybe, they'll take Wreck-It Ralph as an opportunity.
I was surprised she showed up in that, to be honest.
Yeah, and she spoke. She wasn't, Merida was just, lurking in the background, waiting to strike, but...
Well, Merida's Pixar, she didn't count.
She's Disney Pixar.
That's true, yeah.
That's one of those, one of the biggest bad tastes in your mouth, right, is Pocahontas, because it's oh yeah, Colors of the Wind, but then it's also half the stuff in this song is made up stuff that sounds vaguely it could be Native American, right? Made up by white people. Stephen Schwartz was the lyricist for this movie.
But same thing with Mulan, though. It's it's the same thing with Aladdin. It's it's all made by. I made a video about the casting for the live action Aladdin film on my YouTube channel, talking about how people were upset that they cast this half Indian girl as Jasmine, and I was well, technically the Sultan's house is based on the Taj Mahal, and also that's what you get when four white guys write the movie. They kind of
Jasmine in the original story, the character that Jasmine was based off of was actually a Chinese princess.
Right. So I'm
this
just
whole thing is not.
It's a big mix of things. I'm that's what happens when that's usually what happens with Disney movies, because they tend to be written by people that are not from that.
There's no own voices, right? They will cast voice actors correctly now. They've been doing that a lot recently, where they've been casting voice actors, ethnically correct voice actors to these roles, which is good. But it's that's who's controlling the story, though.
Yeah. Very true. Well, that does it for Rage Corner. Or Rant Corner, sorry.
We could go all day about the racism in Disney movies, honestly.
Yeah.
You can go weeks and months for that.
So this is my thing, right? You mentioned what are we hoping for with Jennifer Lee? I'm hoping for more non-Disney princess properties, stuff like Atlantis, like Treasure Planet, like action adventure things like that is like what I would like to see.
Gotcha. So that's how we're going to end the Disney Princess podcast, by hoping for less Disney princesses.
I don't hate them. Like, I don't and we all know how much I love Frozen, but everything's everything's problematic in its own way.
Yeah. Nothing's perfect. There's good and bad in everything. And I guess we'll end there. Ariel, I still cannot forgive you. All right, so find out all the info on this podcast at overlyanimated.com. Join us on Discord to text chat about animation at overlyanimated.com/Discord. Support us via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Taylor, aka Needle. And thanks as always to our Patreon executive producers, John, Ryan, Steve, Alex, Andy, and Hugh. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Au revoir.
Bye.
Au revoir.
I thought you said like mwah, and I was like, oh.
Mwah, my people.